And we are live. Hello, everybody. Today's book chat is with two of the founders of Black Men Teach, so Janoy and Albert. Very lovely to have you with us.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, Kieran. It's good to be here.
How are you both?
Good. It's the start of my half term. Break up on Friday, so I've just been chilling. Yeah.
I'm good as well. Really good. I'm in Budapest, just to brag. So but yeah, it's been really. I've been looking forward to this. So yeah, really.
Yeah.
Looking forward to the conversation about the book. Great book, great author. So yeah.
Definitely. And I think Women Ed, we thought that you two would be brilliant, as would any of the communities part of Black Men Teach, because it's the lived experience, isn't it, of Black educators in an education system that we don't really see enough diversity in at certain levels. So I think should we just jump right into it?
Yeah, I think one thing I did want to say is obviously thank you for you guys for the collaboration as well, because obviously it's going to be a three-part series. So obviously this is the first one, and why that's important for us particularly is because Black boys, Black men, in terms of reading, we know the stereotypes. So it's important for us to begin this journey, and hopefully there's more to come from it.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. Well, we were talking about a book earlier, weren't we? So yeah, you heard that first. Black Men Teaching their book. Right, so we are looking at Jeffrey Boyaki's, I hope I've said that surname correctly, book, What I Heard.
I think it's Boachi.
Thank you. Seriously, honestly, tell me if I've got it wrong and I will correct it.
Yeah.
So teach me that again.
I think it's Boachi.
Boachi. Sorry, Jeffrey. Thank you. So his book, I Heard What You Said, and there's been a lot of traction on Twitter about it already, and a lot of people have read this book. So we're hoping that if you have got any comments or anything you'd like to say as part of this chat, please tweet us at Women Ed Book Club with the hashtag Women Ed, and also you can tweet Black Men Teach as well. I'm going to jump straight into it. So fitting in and standing out being one of the chapters, one of the first ones. On page 9, Jeffrey talks about this dominant whiteness being very pervasive, like gravity. So it equates this white pervasiveness as gravity. So it's something that you can't really avoid in the education system. So explaining that it's a default whiteness permeating the education system. How true has that been for your experiences?
I'll let you go first, should I?
I was just trying to process that question.
It's a big question. It is a big question.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start off with the fact that he notes the experiences of this white fragility of some sort as closely linking to gravity. And I was mentioning earlier that last week I had the privilege of actually hosting Jeffrey at my school, and he further expands upon that concept, because a student actually asked the question of, what do you think of racism? And he basically again correlated it to this whole aspect of it being like gravity, something that holds you down. You don't necessarily notice it until you're doing a task that makes it quite evident. So if it's to jump off the ground and stuff, obviously you won't be able to levitate for too long, more than 5 seconds off the ground. And that's because gravity right there and then is pulling you down. And so I think one of the experiences or my experience as a Black male teacher is going into the system. That's when it's become quite apparent of the gravity that I face, and on a day-to-day basis. When I was a child going through the education system, again, I wasn't as affected as I would say now, knowing that I have that knowledge and I'm able to kind of see from a staff perspective, and also look at it from my students' perspective as well. And so I think he hits the nail on his head, in the sense that it's only when you're in the middle of it, it's only when you're experiencing it, that's when it becomes quite apparent. And I think at that moment in time, it can be a bit overwhelming, because gravity is a powerful force, and you can feel out your depth sometimes. And so I think that is why we need the necessary tools or the support system and stuff to kind of help us navigate the system as a Black male teacher.
I think that's fabulous. Thank you for that. And I mean, obviously you've seen that as you've gone into the education system as a teacher, but did you see that as part of your training as well, as in that you were quite a rarity? Because that's what Jeffrey talks about as well, that it hit him there as well on teacher training, that he was actually rare in that sense as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I was going to add on to this, but I trained as a citizenship teacher, at UCL, and on my course there were four black people, 2 Black male teachers, including myself, doing citizenship, and again it was a case of like, oh, wow. I always like to ask when I go into my training schools, or the students, they tend to ask me, "Oh, are you our PE teacher, or are you?" They don't think that I could be there teaching citizenship. And I think I never ever thought that I would be an advocate for Black males. I just never thought that. I just thought that, hey, I'm just doing this teaching, I'm doing citizenship, getting to the education system, and I guess my experience or lack thereof has kind of led me on this path to be an advocate of the fact that there needs to be more, and as a result of that, I currently work with UCL, the IOE, and I share my story and all of those things, because with the hope that we're trying to raise more profile or get more Black males into teaching, and also into those rare subjects where it's seen as they shouldn't be there,
I think it's hit the nail on the head. There's not much more for me to add, but some of the notes I wrote down based on that question. It's a very strong start to his book, I'd say, as well. It's very a very prominent start, and a start that affects most Black people in the education system, if not every Black person or every person of color within the education system. You ask, is that true? Does a default whiteness permeate the education system? Yes, it is true. Why is it true? Because these are British schools. They're historically white schools. Obviously, over time, we've seen the demographic change in some of these schools, but that hasn't always followed suit in terms of staff and sort of the teaching body in some schools. Obviously, some schools have come a long way, and you see diverse teacher staff, diverse SLT teams, etc. But in most cases, it's a white system, it's a white curriculum, and people of color and Black people or ethnic minorities, they're almost fighting for a place within this white British education system. One of my notes, I put down limiting potential. I think when we talk about the gravity of it all and why it can be such an issue, is because of the limiting potential, that glass ceiling that we talk about, and not feeling you're able to actually progress and actually make the impact that you want. And that links into some of the issues that we have with the recruitment of Black teachers, or the retention of some teachers. In my teacher training, I was the only Black male teacher, only Black person on my course training to become a PE teacher. And I was the minority when I went into education spaces, and I definitely felt like I was the minority. I felt like I was out of my comfort zone, and I say that uncomfortability. I still brought myself. I wasn't afraid of that, but it was difficult. And for some people, it's an opportunity. In some of the conferences I've been in over the last couple of weeks, they talk about being in that uncomfortable space is how you can actually thrive, and it's where you are able to actually find yourself. No one wants to stay comfortable. You want to step out of your comfort zone and actually thrive. But obviously, with regards to the white system and the education system, yes, there is a whiteness that still permeates most of the education system, because we look at the curriculum, we look at most SLT teams, we look at governor boards and trusts and etc. Most of it is white.
Thank you for your honesty, both of you. It's really interesting what you've said, Albert, about the fact that you have felt uncomfortable in these spaces. And it's almost sometimes a norm, I think, for people of colour going into those spaces that are predominantly white is uncomfortable. But I think what would be interesting is having that sort of empathy come from white people and how they should actually be feeling a little uncomfortable themselves, actually, because the fact that this idea of having to fight through a system to be accepted or to be seen, that should make them feel uncomfortable in terms of their privilege, which I think we are, when you look at some of the diverse ed work that we're going towards, you can see that is something that they're going to have to take ownership of. But it links really well with what Jeffrey said about, and it's what you've both sort of said in your experiences. My existence as a Black teacher is something of a provocation to the status quo. And I've just written in capitals, powerful, because I thought, oh my goodness, it's exactly what you've both just really said there, that you are provoking something. And I mean, speaking from my personal experiences, I know that I've made some white people uncomfortable just existing in the spaces that I find myself in, because I haven't been what they've stereotypically expected me to be. How true is that for your experience as a Black teacher, as a Black man in education? Do you feel that you're a provocation as well?
In some respect, yes, because I'm one of the, let's say, lucky, and I say I'm one of the lucky ones. I shouldn't be one of the lucky ones. It shouldn't just be the norm. I've found I'm at a school where I feel comfortable, where I feel valued, I feel sort of respected. So and I'm not the anomaly in my school, because we have a diverse sort of teaching body. However, in my journey and in the bigger picture, in education as a whole, yes, we are an anomaly. It's not the norm, which is why we see the reaction from teachers, from parents, from students when we pick up the phone and when they meet us face to face. Oh, you're the head of year. Oh, you're responsible for my childcare, or oh, you're our cover teacher today. Like, so we see it in the reaction. And it's their honest reaction, and that may come from a place of ignorance, that may come from a place of naivety, and or just not knowing or not experiencing that before. When it comes to children, I would say it's important for us to not be afraid to be that anomaly. Sometimes, sometimes we talk about being that one Black teacher in the school, or that one person of color in a school, and having to fight the good fight for all of the kids, or for being that one that's leading the way in Black History Month, or whatever it may be. And sometimes that can be tiring, but it's important for the children and the staff and parents to actually experience having a positive Black, in our case, male role models that are teaching their children, working with them, building relationships, because they start to see Black men in a different narrative than what's portrayed in the media. So yes, we are an anomaly, but it is a provocation of the system. And Jeffrey Rauch, he was very honest in his words. He said what a lot of us are feeling.
Definitely. Janoy, have you got anything to add to that?
I mean, Albert pretty much said it all, but I think I don't want this to be controversial, what I'm about to say, because I'm really trying to think it over. I'm a migrant. Okay, I was born in Jamaica and I came to the UK when I was 7. So this isn't my home country, I'd say. When my dad took me here, we kind of knew that there would be white teachers. We kind of knew that. We kind of knew the system would be one of whiteness, right? And from somebody once said that history is told from the perspective of the victors, right? And so we understand that even when we study about slavery and all those different things, it is told from the victor's perspective. And I can't I don't blame the system. I really don't blame the system, because we're here in a white country, and so this is it. But my query comes from the fact that England has played a large role in infiltrating certain cultures and taking people and all of those. Let's not forget the past of England. Let's not forget the past. And so I find it a bit insensitive to not accommodate the differences that they have made way for. So, for example, Black people are here as a result of slavery. Let's say there's other ways of migration, especially after the Windrush generation. We're here because we were invited over. Okay, and key thing is, we were invited. We were asked to come and help rebuild the motherland and so on and so forth. And so I think it's so important that we should have a system that accommodates the people that we want to feel at home. And so I say that with the system, that there has to be diversity. We shouldn't be a provocation of the system, because the system should adapt to all of us, because we belong here and we were asked to be here. And so yes, Jeffrey touched it. He's so right, but I don't agree that we should be a provocation of the system. That video that we done, Albert, in 2 years ago, the beginning of lockdown, respect me as a Black man and so on and so forth. And it started, I was like, okay, cool. A lot of people, the traction is there. And then the conversation started going on like, wow, this is fantastic. What's an anomaly? And I was like, it shouldn't be an anomaly, because we're not new. We're not new to England. We're not new to this system. And so I think there should have been representation a long time ago. And so I'm in two minds here. Yes, we're a provocational system, but why should we be for so long? Should it not be the norm now for there to be representation? That's where my mind is.
I have a little bit to add. So I'm not sure if you're aware of White Yardie. Long story short, it's a white man. White Yardie comedian. So white man who's born and raised in Jamaica. His ethnicity, his background was questioned. He spoke about going to school in Jamaica and them not having a White History Month because he's white, and it's like they don't need to have a White History Month. He felt welcomed, he felt included, because he was integrated into their culture and he was part of their system, and obviously he brought his own. So that's what you spoke about first. That reminded me of him, and what you say is like, yeah, it is a British country. Obviously we expect it to be a British system. However, an openness to the diversity of the people within your system, I think that's crucial. But then I wrote in my notes on this topic, insignificantly small. So I think Jeffrey speaks about feeling insignificantly small within the system, and he compares it to a drop of ink or something within a test tube, and sometimes you can feel like empowered, you can feel like you're making a difference, you're making a change. But however, with a click of a finger, a drop of a pen, whatever, you can automatically feel isolated. That drop of ink in a sea, where and there are educators out there that do feel isolated. They're the only one. I've mentioned that. So that I just thought, that's how a lot of educators are feeling, and are not able to speak up within the systems because they are an anomaly and they don't have the adequate support networks or people to approach with how they honestly feel, because they are the anomaly in the system.
Yeah, completely. I think White Yardie has sort of missed the whole point of Black History Month as well, by the way. There's a reasoning behind why we have it, and it shouldn't really just be a month, really. It should be part of the system anyway. It's interesting what you both said, and I can be controversial as well. Don't you think, though, actually, it's coming now, like the diversity and representation and things like that, but I think when I read that, Jeffrey's point maybe was actually it's a provocation to white guilt. because it's the fact that what you've just said, Shanoy, like the way that certain countries have been built, it's not particularly a very pretty picture, really. And if you face up to that truth, it's going to make people feel uncomfortable. And it went back to that point I was saying, that actually we aren't the ones that should really be feeling uncomfortable. The provocation part is the fact that you're instead of sweeping it under the carpet, which is what has happened for decades and decades and decades, it's finally having to come out, and there's a lot of trauma that's going to be released. There's going to have to be a lot of healing as well. But it's that idea that unless you want authentic change and you want to diversify and represent properly, we need to own these stories before we can move forward, really. And that does come down, like, I think it's a provocation in terms of white guilt and white privilege, because there's a reasoning behind the fact that there weren't a lot of us around at a certain point in these positions, which we are now. So when you think of education, it's a social justice issue for a lot of us. But actually, it's where you have a voice, it's where you're enabling others, and there's that power. And you can think about that in terms of, well, is that another thing as well, that the more empowering you are, the power will never run out. But it's the fact that if power is then centered around people of different cultures, ethnicities, and diversity, is white privilege the thing that's being threatened here? I know I'm going off on a whole thing here, but it feels like some of the things that you were saying, Shanoy, sort of harken back to the idea that we need to own up to these stories beforehand before we can actually move forward properly. Albert, I think you wanted to say something.
No, I think I'm just thinking in schools on a day-to-day basis, who is feeling guilty? I don't think anyone's feeling guilty about anything. I understand in terms of like the bigger picture, in terms of things needing to change, but unless there's actions with that, we saw, the black curriculum put forward a proposal to whether it was DFE or the government directly, and it got shut down. And they're like, no, we're not interested in changing the curriculum. So who's feeling guilty is the question I asked there. It's like, so as much as I understand the point in terms of provocation to the system, and some people may feel like empathize with the scenario and become an ally, but in terms of the bigger picture, where long-term change can actually be enforced, like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure the guilty part is particularly, like, I don't think that's the reality on a day-to-day basis.
You see, so I would say yes, there's guilt, but I will also say there's a level of hiding your head in the sand, and we may not see the guilt come to the forefront, but what we do see is a lot of leaders hide their heads in the sand, and as if the matter isn't there, and it only become prevalent when they're forced to do so. So, for example, obviously the George Floyd killing, or the murder, sorry. I don't believe that there was much of a force on emphasis on a change, a systematic change or institutional change, as much as there was in 2020. Prior to that, diversity and inclusion and all those weren't buzzwords. In the school that I work at, we've tried to create a working race, race, I can't remember the name of it, but just to tackle those kind of things. And so it's a case where I feel that the closer you are to the problem, the more guilty you may feel. But until you're close to the problem, or you're evident of it, it will be a case that you're just burying your head in the sand. And I feel like a lot of places within the UK, that's where it is. I think there's a statistic that we came across of this weekend that 40% of schools in England and Wales, I believe, let's just say England, don't have a black member of staff. 40% still. And I know London is cosmopolitan. I know Birmingham. I know Manchester and stuff. But there are rural areas where people are yet to be engaged with a black teacher. And so I think until then, they are burying their heads in the sand because the world is not like that, right? The world, minority ethnic groups, we're not minorities. We're actually the global majority. 85% of the people within the world are non-white. Like, that's the reality. That's the facts, right there. But yet still, unless there is that intentionality, unless people are faced with a problem on their doorstep, they'll forever act ignorant and feel like life is good, all is well.
Yeah, because you're removed from it. Yeah, completely. That. Yeah. Yeah, you've sort of touched on this question quite a bit, so we don't need to go into too much with this one, but obviously feel free if you want to. Page 25, he talks about the archetypal immigrant experience. So how much does education have to, I think you've sort of touched on it, how much does education have to learn from this archetypal immigrant experience? Because growing up, he obviously they'd seen racism and things like that as well. I think, speaking for me, I've had it, don't know about you two, but it's sort of part and parcel of that journey, of that idea of moving into a new country or whatever, because it seems to be the experience.
I think with that, that's where I think that's where representation comes into it, because in terms of education, sort of learning from the experiences of immigrants. I think within that story, he was talking about a student who came. I can't remember the part in the book, but anyway, I wrote my notes. What am I saying? There was some. So I was at a conference a couple of days ago, and I was hearing from a guy called Ziggy Moore. He runs a supplementary school for black. So he runs a supplementary school, and he was talking about I can't remember the name of the school. Do you know? Was you in his session? The John.
Yes, the community school. I'll get the name.
I can't remember the name of the school, but it was all about showing black because within black culture or African culture, and I'm Nigerian, so Nigerian culture, there is a standard of sort of a value of education, which we don't see in some of our black students in the UK system. So I was having a conversation with a lady yesterday, and it was about when you go into a different setting. So she done a headship in Nigeria, and in that setting, you're seeing black students who are engaged in their learning. They're sat still in their seats. They're listening to their teachers, and they value their learning. Why? Because it's relative to them. So that's where we link it back to the curriculum and the sort of the UK system, and it links back to the whiteness of it. And sort of the stereotypes that are put on our young people. If we understand where our people are some of our students and and it's not just Africa and black students, it's all students. We have students at my school, particularly, have students that are coming from Romania, from Italy, from various places in the world. And I think it's about understanding their backgrounds and getting to know the child, their culture, and bringing that into so it's not just about black students. I think schools should be doing that across the board, and that ties into the sense of belonging in that child and wanting to be a part of that school community and valuing his education and learning for the long run. So I think with regards to the immigrant experience, it's learning from and getting to know the child, the family, the values, and because there are cultural differences between education in various places in the world compared to the UK, and an understanding of that.
Do you know, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just thinking of this whole concept, especially with the immigrant experience, of assimilation versus integration. You know, and obviously there are some countries, and I teach citizenship, and we looked at case studies and stuff like that, and France, for example, is something that comes up where immigrants or migrants, are often strongly encouraged. I won't use the word forced. Strongly encouraged to be assimilated into their culture. And stuff like religious wear, those kind of things are banned, or there's a real push on being French. I think the UK, considering this great empire, where it's the history that we're stemming from, there's a duty to not necessarily assimilate people into the British culture. Because what is the British culture? It's taken, it's adopted from so many different things. The national dish, curry or takeaway, something like that, right? So what we find is that there shouldn't be this force, there shouldn't be this push to assimilate migrants into a system, but more, as Albert rightly said, is that we should be accommodating, and we should take the time to understand their culture, and it's just the least that we can do. I don't know. That's where my head is going at.
Yeah, I completely agree with both of you, but I want to put the point across that because of your heritage and where you come from, it's almost like, you understand the value of accommodating and understand the value of opening up the world for whichever school or whatever class of children you have, because you understand that feeling of that they need to have a sense of belonging, and that comes from authenticity, that comes from sharing who you are. But how, do you feel that education has learnt that yet, in the sense that, so, we might have, we don't know, in terms of the Ukrainian crisis, and we may get more Ukrainian refugees and things like that back when it was Afghan refugees and Syrian refugees. When we're thinking about that idea of immigrant experiences, there's lots of literature out now, there's lots of books about it, but how brave do you think schools are, and how brave do you think teachers are? And I'm talking about non-white teachers and white teachers, like the comparing. How brave do you think they are in terms of opening up that dialogue for the children? Do you think that they would feel, oh, am I overstepping the mark, or will I become culturally insensitive because I'm not sure of where I should take this? Are we talking about being braver? Is that what the education system needs to be, or does it need to be more honest with itself?
I don't think that comes from a place of bravery. I think that comes from a place of confidence and having knowledge, educating yourself. So when I speak about us educators doing our learning, I think you mentioned the Ukraine sort of crisis and refugees coming over. In order for anyone to open a dialogue with regards to that, you have to go back and do your research and look into what's happening, look into the stories, go and speak to people who know more than you, have more knowledge, and then you feel confident to have conversations. The reason why we're able to have conversations regard to sort of race and ethnicity and these kinds of conversations is because we go and do sort of the background work. We speak to our people, we speak to people who are having different experiences, the successes, the goods, the bads, the highs, the lows, and then once you have that background, then you're able to confidently engage in a conversation because you know what you're talking about. I think where we talk about bravery is because people have a fear of being uncomfortable and engage in that conversation because they don't know enough, or they have no idea what they may know one thing and start the conversation, but what if that conversation takes a U-turn and it goes off in a different, and it's like, oh, they're in unfamiliar water now. So I think it's but then to be fair, it's hard because we have to be honest, it is hard. As we're teachers, we know what workload's like, we know what the capacity is like. Sometimes is it the biggest priority for a particular teacher to go home and then do all of this background research, or go in, and it's only teachers that are caring and passionate and actually want to go above and beyond for that particular student or that particular community and be that difference that do it. And there's loads of educators that are like that, you know. So it's not just black educators that are like that. It's not just non-white educators that are like that. There's loads of white educators that, in my sort of journey, in my schooling experience, there's loads of white educators that have gone above and beyond for me and that have sort of learned and pushed me on a little bit more. And so I think that one is not necessarily just about race. Obviously, race can play a big, factor in terms of who's pushing it forward and who's supporting, but that's just about who's willing to go and do the learning and do the background.
Shall we move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Okay. Right, page 31, he talks about black excellence and this idea that he relates to Gatsby and the idea of self-worth and appearance. Black excellence being holding yourself to high standards. How true has this been of your experience? Because you've both talked about this idea of being advocates. So this image, how authentic are you when you're sort of sharing yourself with your, with your peers in terms of your colleagues as well as your students?
Janoy brings himself to the table, and that's what. But Janoy brings him like, and the reason I say that, we was at the Black Teachers Connect conference yesterday. Shout out to Black Teachers Connect, and Janoy led a workshop called My Puzzle Piece, and he just laid it all down to a group of educators who some may have known him, but most of them wouldn't have known him. He laid his story down, his journey, his puzzle piece. He laid it down, and he began that conversation and that reflection in others to think about their puzzle piece, their super, like what makes them and what influences them, and yeah. So I think that's, sorry to put words in your mouth, Janoy, but yeah. So and I think this authenticity sort of thing is being spoken about quite a lot recently in sort of the spaces that I've been in personally. And I think if you're not bringing yourself to the table, who people said, you are your superpower. Who can do you better than you, and who can sort of be you better than you? And there is no one. So I think authenticity is key. I think students, they see straight through things that are people that are not honestly there for them and believe in them and support them. So do staff. So yeah, I think authenticity is at the forefront if you're not bringing your authentic self. And sometimes that's a challenge because you may not be the proudest of where you've potentially come from, or your history, your background. It may be hard. We've spoken previously about being the anomaly. So if you're the anomaly and you're that one person in the school, then it may be very difficult to bring your authentic, self to that environment, because you're literally the only one, and you may not feel comfortable, you may not feel like you can do that. But yeah, I bring myself to the table.
Janoy, how does Albert bring himself to the table then? Because he's spoken very articulate about how you do it. How does he do it? Come
on. Albert, when I think of Albert, and this isn't something to just say, when I think about Albert, I think one of the things that really connected myself to him was this whole aspect of mentoring and a care for the younger generation, and to kind of fill that gap and take up that responsibility and take up that mantle. And so I think Albert's authentic self is that he's one that isn't selfish. He's one that understands the mission that he has a role to play in society, has a role to play in schools. And so when I think about himself being authentic is that he cares about the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that we need more people like us. And so he will go above and beyond to do that. I would say that he is the epitome of somebody, I would say, that's Black excellence, because when I think of excellence, I'm thinking about consistency and control and showing up and being committed, all of these things where you have to be intentional, and he demonstrates that. And I think, yes, he demonstrates that because that's who he is, but also there is the added pressure that you are a black man and working in a white system, and you just can't allow yourself to, you just can't afford to let yourself go. You can't allow yourself to be identified as the aggressive one, even though sometimes you may get quite frustrated, or you can't afford yourself to be, you know, the one that's extremely loud, or all of those different things. And so authentically he does demonstrate black excellence, but I think there's also that added pressure knowing that because he's the one of few or whatever in his school or in his environment, he needs to represent his, you know, I can never say that word. He needs to represent the demographic. He needs to represent black male teachers well, because he may be the only example of a black teacher that somebody may see. And it'll be a shame for them to go away from meeting him and thinking, oh my God, is this how all black teachers are, black male teachers? Well, if they were to come away from Albert, they'll know that, yeah, that's a good example right there. So
Albert, I think you'd echo that for Janoy, probably, wouldn't you? That was lovely.
Most definitely.
That brings me on to this the story about Leroy, and he talks about Leroy being freely black in the urban sense, in the urban cultural sense. I thought of Dre when I thought of Leroy from Blackish, to be honest. And this confidence to let, I love this. This was like one of my favourite quotes. The confidence to let my blackness shine a little brighter through his unknowing permission. That's how Jeffrey felt around Leroy, and I just thought that was beautiful. And that to me is black excellence, in the sense that you're enabling someone to shine a little brighter and be themselves, regardless of who you are or where you're from. So it sounds like you two enable each other quite a bit. But who would you say has also enabled you, and who do you think you're enabling?
I've got to say my brother Jordan Braid. When he worked at Jordan Braid, he's a member of the Black Men Teach team. And he was my colleague until recently. He had to move closer to home. But he just, that's a not. So there's different parts of this book where I think, damn, like that's I've got such a relatable experience, like in my own journey, and that's one of them, because Jordan was like, he's a little bit older than me, but he was he was authentically himself. He brought himself to the table each and every single day, and that meant that. So he was himself with the kids, the staff, the way he spoke, the way he dressed, his the trainers, everything. And I turn back from that and think, yeah, that's it. Just if I felt more comfortable coming to work every day, knowing that I've got my brother there who gets me, and he's so he may not know this, and I want to message him afterwards, but he's one for me that was like, yeah, he encouraged me to just keep doing a little bit more, and you know, stepping out of my comfort zone, and bringing the full me to the table.
Thank you for that, Janoy.
Yeah, I think just like what Albert said, and also what's written in the book. For me, I started the same year as one of my good friends, David Elliott, and our classroom was literally opposite each other, and so in my school we have this rule where obviously all teachers must be at their door during lesson changeover and stuff. And I mean, the kids literally just like, sir, he's your they said that we were best friends before we acknowledged that we were good friends, just in the way that we were just like the competition, the healthy competition between us, to be the best teacher that we can be, both teaching citizenship and religious studies. The results, those years were just crazy. The kids, the learning, the level that we kind of just elevated in the HUMS department, just because of that competition between us and the care that we have for each other, it is something that I would say if I didn't start the same year as him, I don't think I would have been as confident as I am now. And obviously, he's gone on to greener pastures, gone to be a head of department, and we've kind of separated, knowing the fact that we're both going on to greener pastures, new challenges, but we both value the starting point where we had each other to bounce off each other, to bounce with each other ideas and hold each other up to our high standards, because there's no way he would have allowed me to come to work and be anyhow Mr. Jesus, and that's likewise with himself. And so I think that relationship there, that even when we have, like, I don't know, a new black staff or what, it's just that, hey, you're part of this whole puzzle piece now, so I'll use that. And you need to carry yourself with a level of decorum that you're doing us proud. And you're doing us proud. And I think part of Black excellence is that you can't see somebody else, from the same place as you, just behaving substandard. And so you push them and you encourage them. And I think that's that's one thing I saw between that relationship right there that Jeffrey spoke about, is that for him to be his authentic self, he really trusted the relationship that he had with Leroy.
On that note, I wrote a couple of questions. So just to put it out there, I just wrote questions. So who determines this blackness? So how black is too black? How do you have to speak a certain way, dress a certain way, listen to a type of music? Because that's part of what Jeffrey was unpicking. He was slightly different to what the norm of black was. But then I think we can go a little bit further. It's like, who determines what black is? Like, black is black. And then I think you wrote down a couple of questions, Kieran. It's like, and I put down, what does it even mean to be free? Like, what? I think we have to explore what it means to be free. Like, what does it mean to be free within the education system for a black person? And what does it mean to be free for a black child? Or and I don't know. I don't know the answers to those questions, but it's like, I think those, just to challenge or provoke a little bit further thought, it's like, those are some of the questions that came to mind on that one.
You got any thoughts on those questions, Janoy?
So let's start with the first one, about who determines blackness, or what is blackness. I don't think that there is a definition for what blackness is. I don't think it's a verb nor a noun. If I was to say anything, I'll think it's a sense of being, because my friends will say, the way I speak, the way I communicate, my students will even say, like, sir, like, well, there you go with those big words. Or like, when I use slang sometimes, and I try to mix it up a bit. Like, for example, there's a new word, I don't know if you heard it, called charge it, right? Like, charge it means firm it, right? And I was like, when they're explaining that to me, it's like, sir, just stop right there. Just stop. And in that moment, I say, am I even black? Because I just don't even know if I meant to. Am I saying it right or not? And so I think, if we are trying to find the parameters to pinpoint what blackness is, we'll have to go way back, because it isn't something that's as easy, because there's also intersectionality within blackness, right? Sexual orientation, country, religion, all of those different things, but it all adds to the greater umbrella term of blackness. So I think I will not spend my time trying to define blackness. I'm just going to be myself, right? And hoping that I'm representing whatever that connotation of blackness is. And that's where I've camped with that knowledge. I'm not going to stress myself with that. And so when people ask me, sir, even black or whatever, it's like, I don't know. I'm myself, but I don't know. And so I would say, Blackness can't be defined. It can't be defined. And if you're going to try and define it, you've got a lot of work to make sure that everything is included in that.
That's a brilliant answer. Yeah, this idea as well then. So you sort of touched on it on what you were both saying in terms of like what is black, the black stereotypes as well, that I frankly think would make people comfortable, really, because it's their way of navigating something that they don't understand. But he talks about Jamal, this student that he had, who I think when I read it, I think the question that I had was he, and he sort of questioned it himself as well, was he being hyper vigilant because Jamal was black, or was he being hyper attentive to him in terms of fearing for his future? But then that sort of put a stereotype on this young boy, which is unfair. But was Jeffrey reinforcing those black stereotypes that he was fearful of, or was he looking out for him? Because I'm still, I don't know how I think he'd then come to the conclusion about what teaching is and listening to the core selves within the care you're there to serve these children. But was he hyper vigilant, or was he hyper attentive? I don't know. You can answer that question.
I don't know. I think what he was trying, I think from how he sort of told the story, his intentions came from a good place, but the way and the outcome in terms of him having a go at the student, I think it just ended in not the best way. But then arguably the emotion shown from that child would argue that it's potentially what he needed, because the way he says the child brings a comment, not even my mum speaks to me like that. It's like, I mean, this it's almost like this child is longing for someone to actually see him and care, because like the way, obviously I don't know the detail in how it actually played out, but the way it was told, it seemed to me, I'm on the fence in terms of whether he was being hypervigilant, because he mentions being stuck in a child's future, and and I think that comes from us understanding the histories in schools with regards to black boys and exclusion rates and detentions, isolation, correction rooms, and the path that it can potentially lead a black boy into. However, it's not fair for anyone to put that on the child, because you have no idea. You have no idea what this child's future is gonna play out to be. But however, being hyper vigilant could potentially protect that child from doing something he may regret, or the consequences may be and lead to an exclusion. So, for example, if you're hyper vigilant and you're seeing that child outside his lessons, and you're taking note, and you're going to have conversations when no one's asked you to, but you're going to have conversations with that child because you care and because you're aware of what history says is going to happen in terms of the let's say it's a flow chart, let's say, or the route that has been taken, as so many black boys have gone down. But I think it's a difficult one. I think definitely shouting at a child and talking about racism, this and it's a conversation that could be had with young people, but definitely not in that manner. But then in that scenario, I think it's a difficult one. Because I think his aim is to prevent and protect that young person, which led to a whole load of emotion and care, nurturing, and yeah. So I don't know. I'm on the fence as well, because I linked it to my own practice, because sometimes that's one. So I mentioned that from the book, I've done a lot of learning, because in that situation, through mentoring, sometimes we work with students who are exactly as Jeffrey depicted, and we want to almost prevent and sort of allow them to realize their full potential and not go down a route of exclusions and disengaging from education. So sometimes you're almost stuck in the worst case scenario, and trying to get them to understand that it is a scenario, even if they don't see it right now, just for them to be aware of it. So I had to look at it and think, is that actually the right way to do it? Like, I think it's a difficult one. Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah, there isn't much I'll say other than the fact that I have found myself in similar scenarios where I can't help but make it very apparent about the stereotypes of Black boys within the education system. And I think one of the things that really make a conversation like that very effective is the maturity of the child and how they will view your intervention, your care, your policing, if they want to say, bring it as that. As they get older, I believe, and they have the maturity and to understand that, wow, I am in a system which isn't necessarily made for me, so I just need to make sure that I'm able to navigate it safely. But I've had conversations like that with year 7s, 8, 9, 10, and 11. I think the more effective it is, the more they understand. The intention will always be good, but you have to know the maturity of that child, because they could just see it as an attack. They won't even recognize the fact that if themselves and their white counterpart was going to do the same thing, the same it's not the same what's the word, act, they say the same act, the sanction will not be the same. It just won't be the same. And that's from experience, and that's from seeing it as well. So they need to know how to kind of navigate that space properly. And I think I wish I was a good kid. I was a good kid in secondary school, also in primary, but I think a character, a teacher like Jeffrey, somebody I would take as, yeah, you're actually on my side. You want to see me win. I wouldn't go on the defense of it.
I think. Sorry, Karen.
No, go on, Albert. Go on.
No, I was just going to say I agree, and I think when we talk about representation and us being in the education system, sometimes the part of that purpose is to challenge scenarios like this, where we see students potentially going down that route, leading to exclusion, whatever it may be, and actually stepping in before it gets. So, some like it in what another way that story could have gone is that Jeffrey doesn't do anything, and that child does go down a certain path, and he regrets not stepping in or not acting. So it's like weighing it up. Yeah.
No, yeah, I think what came through to me was that it was, as much as it was from a good place, I think it was driven by fear for the child. And I think and that's that last bit that he says about the core, and if it was coming from compassion maybe rather than fear, I don't know. It would have made me feel more comfortable. Probably it's probably why I'm saying it as it is. I think it was out of fear rather than anything else, regardless of the fact that the intention was good. Yeah. And it could have been seen as an attack from that child then, because it's, well, are you on my side? Are you not? But I love the fact that how honest he's been throughout this book.
Yeah.
Right, we're going to move on to the last one then, and we've touched on it quite a bit actually throughout this chat. Are you all right to go over a bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. Lovely. Right, so the curriculum is diversifying. I think there are pockets of it where I know genuinely that I've seen it in terms of when we're thinking about race and cultures and stuff like that, but also in terms of neurodiversity, in terms of disability, in terms of there's a lot intersectionality basically, and I think we've been part of the Diverse Ed book, so there are pockets of it we can see that. What has your experience been of that?
Well, like in my school, I've seen lots of positive change over the last, and I can't credit this to myself. It's nothing, and it's not necessarily Black educators either. It's I'm looking at sort of our history department in our school. She's left our school now, but when she was there, she was doing loads of work with the history curriculum, and she didn't need to, but she was sending it across to me just to have a look, and there was just so that it's diverse and representative of loads of different aspects of culture and the world, and not just the common things that we're used to seeing in history classes, but Black Tudors. I was like, I had no sort of knowledge of anything in regards to that, and I walked into a lesson, I saw Black Tudors being taught, and I was like, that's like actually interesting. I stayed by the door, had listened for a little bit. Another scenario, a student came up to me. I've never don't teach the student. The student is a black boy in my school, but I've got a pretty good relationship with him. And he came up to me, oh sir, like we learned about where I'm from in my lesson today. And I was like, where you from? He's like, Benin. And the smile on his face, and obviously they're doing a lot of work around Benin City and the history in regards to the UK and sort of whether it's jewels or artifacts that have been taken. So there's, I would say I'm more confident that my school is in terms of different staff are taking it upon themselves to diversify their areas of the curriculum. I think what needs to happen in the bigger picture of things is a more collective approach so that everyone is getting the same experience, because at the moment it's individual schools are showing loads of good practice, or individual teachers, but then that's great for them and their classes, but what about the masses of students? What about the students up north who don't have a teacher that's diverse? I think that there needs to be a wider sort of collective approach to some of the curriculum changes.
Yeah, I agree. I think I could share what my school has done, but in the grand scheme of the movement of diversifying the curriculum, we're not really making much change or much movement in the grand in the bigger picture, and so it needs to come from the top down. It has to come from the top down, and so from the government, it has to come from those in power, decision makers who understand the need, like truly understand the need and why we need to do this, and then trickle that down. That's the only way we can say that there's going to be movement in that place.
I'll just say I can't wait for Labour to get in there, really, because I don't think it's going to happen with this government. But this idea of cultural capital as well, so it is very Eurocentric, isn't it? The system that we've got still is very Eurocentric. And in navigating the whiteness in that, it's obviously equally valuable to see cultural capital as more than these dominant cultures that we have. So my question to you two is that it's obviously happening within your schools, but if you weren't there or your presence wasn't there, do you think it would be happening?
So good. Such a good question. That's where my mind has been, in terms of really embedding things into the culture, I would say. And the thing about culture is that it lives on or outlives the one individual that brings it forth. And I think my focus with my school is that I'm really trying to make sure that things are really embedded in the culture. This is the first time, Black History Month, where the canteen was serving like Black food, and I'm from a school in Croydon, right? So it's just down the road. There's a Jamaican shop or Nigerian shop, but this is the first time since I've been there. I would say a school has done stuff like jollof rice and chicken and rice and peas, despite the majority of the students coming from BAME backgrounds. It's crazy. But I think in order for that to happen, there needs to be the removal of that one teacher, and really make a team of teachers that's then going to embed it into the system. Until that team, then if that teacher goes, then everything goes along with them. And we've heard the stories, and we know that does happen.
But then, so with I agree. So I'm slightly different in my school because there's certain things that I say if this question has been asked recently to me as well. So I've been thinking about it. One thing that I'm not sure about, so I do a lot of mentoring in my school, and so the mentoring side of things for particular groups of disadvantaged students, would that carry on? Maybe not, because mentoring comes with a certain passion and a certain lived experience that you're able to try and influence as a group of students. So it's almost like I wouldn't necessarily expect it to carry on. However, how it could carry on, and which is what I've sort of tried to do now, is whether there's an external party. So because of my capacity now, I can't. I don't have the capacity to lead mentoring as much as I'd love to, but there's external organisations who now come into our school and lead that. Now this is the second year we've had that, and the way it's set up, you would like the question: would it carry on after I leave? That's a fingers crossed, and almost like you hope that it's set up, because it is all set up with our alternate provision sort of support as well. Because in my school, there's a lot of interventions that go on regardless of the mentoring. However, the mentoring is added to it. So it's almost like it's a fingers crossed and sort of a wait and see. But then with regards to the race and like like Junoy said, when there's a team and a group of people that are inspired towards a collective change, it doesn't matter if one person leaves, because you've got a group of people who are still carrying on that mission. And then that's why it almost has to be embedded in the school culture, and embedded in the leadership teams as well. So with that, it can't just be the isolated teacher leading things. Otherwise, if they do go, yes, of course it's going to leave with them, because no one else cares about it, or no one's bought into what you're doing. However, if others buy into it, then there's a more of a chance of it to carry on.
Right, we're going to leave with this one then. So we've talked about assimilation quite a bit already, and Jeffrey talks about this idea of assimilating and surviving, sort of, can they go hand in hand, do they work in tandem? But then he moves on to this idea of what it means to thrive as well within the education system as a Black man. So I want this to hopefully be hopeful. Do you feel like you are thriving in this education system, the one where there's pervasive whiteness that acts like gravity? Do you feel that you are thriving?
I would say yes. I would say I'm thriving the best way I can. So I'm being me. I'm being myself. I'm bringing my experiences, my sort of background to the table, and so far to date, that hasn't failed me. And Martha the Costa Sherwood was talking about that yesterday at the BTC conference. It was like being you are like, I said it before, like there's no one can do you better than you, and your lived experiences, your culture, your beliefs, your passions. I bring that to work every single day. When people talk to me about education in schools and going to work, like I love actually going to work. I love teaching. I love not teaching. Let's say that I actually don't love teaching. I enjoy teaching, but I love working with young people. Right, that's the part there. So I really do enjoy teaching, but teaching is sort of the means where I sort of aim to empower and work with young people. So in my experience in my career so far, this is my 5th year into teaching. So experience within reason, but still very new still kind of new to within education. I've been able to progress. We've got Black Men Teach. We've got we're thriving. We're thriving, and hopefully we can inspire and encourage others to see that this is a place where you can thrive. So as much as there will be challenges, no one's denying that. There will be difficulties. There may be times you feel like an anomaly. It is possible to thrive and be yourself and come as your authentic, true self, and still do well and be successful and thrive. well, the last thing I would say on that is is it diverse ed, I believe, have the saying, go where you are celebrated, not tolerated. So that's crucial. You know, why stay in an environment that isn't supportive of you, that doesn't value you? If you're not receiving that in your environment, that something needs to change. All right. And what was mentioned yesterday, are you going to sacrifice yourself? You know, who you are, what you believe in, or are you going to move on and go where you're celebrated so you can actually be allowed to thrive, allowed to progress, and allowed to be you? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it, man. I share it. I share what he's talking about. One thing I am mindful of, though, is the fact that I would say a level of my excelling or thriving comes down to just my personality and just comes down to who I am, because I know that there are some people, black males, who aren't thriving, who are questioning, and they reach out to Black Men Teach, and they said they've had horrible experiences and stuff, and it's, again, it reinforces the fact that just because you're black and a male and we have shared experiences, but it's very unique as well, because it just comes down to who you are. And I'd say that if you aren't, and if you find that you aren't thriving, please connect to a network. It generally doesn't even need to be Black Men Teach or whatever, but connect to a network and find like-minded individuals, draw strength from them, and then be empowered to actually make that change or take the next step. But that's the only way. That's the right step. That's the step in the right direction.
Absolutely. And the only way you can do that, I suppose, connect is through being your authentic self. So it sort of invites you to do that, doesn't it, really, in order to connect?
Are you thriving, Kieran?
Oh gosh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, yes, I am. No, you know what? I can say, if it wasn't for Women Ed, before Women Ed, my career was interesting in the sense that I didn't come across women that were very nice, I'll just say. Whereas when I'd met women from Women Ed, Hannah Wilson being one of them, it was a strange feeling when you have another lady who is very encouraging and very, receptive of how much you want to do well in your job for the children that you're teaching. So I think echoes from a Women Ed perspective as well, Black Men Teach, and what it's done for you and what I'm sure it's doing for lots of black men out there. So definitely. Right, thank you so much, and thank you for going over as well. I hope you've enjoyed the chat as much as I have. I think we've got really deep in a very short space of time as well. So I think it's been a quality book chat. So we're just going to wave goodbye. Don't go yet, though, because I'm going to end the broadcast, but don't go just yet.